Georgie and Mandy's wedding. A reunion, a reckoning, and a glimpse into the future. The church was filled with laughter, the scent of fresh flowers, and the hum of whispered excitement. The moment had finally arrived, Georgie and Mandy's first marriage. A union that had taken its time to come full circle was about to be sealed with vows. Yet, amidst the joy, a familiar face stood out in the crowd, drawing the attention of every Cooper present. George Sr. had returned. For longtime fans of the show, his presence was nothing short of an emotional tidal wave. His absence had been deeply felt, a wound left unspoken, yet always lingering in the background. Now here he was, watching his son take a monumental step forward in his life. A wedding years in the making. Georgie had always been the kind of guy who learned things the hard way. When he and Mandy first got together, their relationship had been far from traditional. An unexpected pregnancy had forced them to grow up fast, and though they loved each other, they hadn't taken the conventional route to the altar. But time had a way of shaping people, and here they were, older, wiser, and more determined than ever to do things right. This wasn't just about romance or obligation. This was about love, family, and proving to each other that they were meant to be together. The ceremony itself was simple yet beautiful. Sheldon, of course, had an amusing speech prepared, a perfect mix of sentimental and overly analytical. Missy wiped away a tear, pretending she wasn't crying, while Mima looked proudly at her grandson, knowing just how much he had matured. And then there was George Sr., an emotional return. For years, his absence had been a void that no one dared to talk about too much. His return was unexpected, almost surreal. The man who had once been the backbone of the Cooper family was back, if only for this moment. As Georgie stood at the altar, waiting for Mandy to walk down the aisle, he turned and met his father's eyes. The emotion between them was palpable. A silent conversation passed between them, one that didn't need words to be understood. "I'm proud of you, son," George Sr. finally whispered when they had a brief moment alone before the ceremony began. Georgie swallowed hard, nodding. "I wish you could have been here for everything." "I was," George Sr. said, his voice thick with emotion, "just not in the way I wanted to be." It was a moment of reconciliation, a chance for closure, or perhaps a beginning of something more. Will George Sr. return for more? Following the emotional episode, the show's executive producer addressed the lingering question on everyone's minds. Was this a one-time return, or could George Sr. be back for more? In an interview, the EP acknowledged the weight of his return, recognizing how deeply it resonated with fans. Bringing back George Sr. for Georgie and Mandy's wedding was always part of the plan. It was such an important moment for the Cooper family, and we knew it wouldn't be complete without him, they said. As for whether he'll return, we'll see, the EP teased. His presence had a big impact, and there's always room for more stories. This cryptic response sent fans into a frenzy, speculating on what could be next. Would George Sr. appear in more flashbacks? Could there be a storyline that somehow brings him back in a more significant way? What his return meant for the Coopers. Even if George Sr. doesn't return permanently, his presence at the wedding was a turning point for several characters. For Georgie, it was a reminder that even those we lose remain part of our lives. It was validation that his father would have been proud of the man he had become. For Mary, it was a bittersweet moment. Time had passed, life had moved forward, but seeing George Sr. again brought a flood of emotions she wasn't sure she was ready for. For Mima, it was another chapter in a long and complicated history, a reminder of how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. And for Sheldon, the ever-rational scientist found himself experiencing something he couldn't quite explain. Maybe, just maybe, some things in life were beyond logic. the future of young Sheldon and the Cooper legacy. As young Sheldon nears its conclusion, George Sr.'s brief but powerful return raises even more questions about how the show will wrap up. Fans know what's coming. It's been hinted at since the early days of The Big Bang Theory. But the journey to that point is what keeps everyone watching. Perhaps George Sr.'s reappearance is just the beginning. Maybe the showrunners are laying the groundwork for a heartfelt, emotional farewell that honors his role in the Cooper family in a way that gives both the characters and the audience a sense of closure. Or maybe, in true young Sheldon fashion, there's one last surprise in store. A wedding to remember. As Georgie and Mandy exchanged vows, sealing their love with a kiss, the camera panned across.